shenanigans, the excitement, but the substance, not just the sizzle, but we need the steak. That's what we're looking for tonight. Let's bring in Congressman Mick Mulvaney and Congressman Brendan Boyle, a Democrat, a Republican. Great to have you both. Look, you're both ensconced in your home states, and no doubt, as I mentioned at the top of the show, getting an earful from the regular folks out there what they need to hear. Representative Mulvaney, what is the number one thing your constituents are dying to have addressed tonight?
The debt. I just spent about 2 days doing Veterans Day events where you would think that national defense would come up a lot or the VA would come up a lot, and woven into every single one of those questions I get has been a question about spending and the deficit and the debt, especially all the attention revolving around the budget deal that we passed a couple weeks ago, where we spent more on the military but also spent more on social welfare. Folks back home are scared to death that we're spending too much money, and that's what I'm hearing about almost every place I go down here.
I would imagine, Representative Boyle, you're hearing similar things, but then it's when these guys start to figure out ways to tackle the debt, which means spending cutbacks and maybe touching certain third rails. People get touchy. It's almost a NIMBY version of all of the benefits that we've all been used to getting, such as Medicare, Social Security, etc. What are you hearing from your constituents that you need addressed tonight?
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be with you, Liz and Mick. I have to say that hasn't been my experience. I represent a district here in Philadelphia, in suburban Philadelphia, and I would say that the debt would not rank in the top 5 in terms of issues that are raised to me.
What does?
The issue by far that I hear about the most is what we can do to increase people's paychecks. I would say that would rank far and away number 1. What we can do to improve our education system and reduce the cost of higher education is something that I hear about a great deal, especially when I visit, oddly enough, when I visit senior citizen homes. They are very concerned about the sort of debt that their grandkids is incurring, not the national debt, but student loan debt. And then also hear still about health care, not so much the politics of Obamacare, but what we can do to reduce the cost of Medicaid, Medicare, and traditional insurance. So I know Mick and I represent 2 different constituencies in 2 different states, and it's interesting. It sounds like we've had 2 rather different experiences.
Well, it does, but everybody certainly cares, Representative Mulvaney, about taxes. And I really begin to wonder about these, the Journal called it today, the bold tax plans. And they use that almost with 2 shades of bold, sort of positive and gutsy, but also a little unrealistic. Is there any tax plan that you need to have included that would imagine sort of a better situation for both Main Street and big business?
Sure. I'm sort of biased having endorsed Senator Rand Paul for president, but I think if you look across all of the Republicans, what you're seeing is a common theme, which is that we need a simpler tax program. People recognize the fact not only that the taxes that we pay now are too confusing, they're simply unfair. If you can hire a lobbyist, if you can hire an expensive accountant or a lawyer, you're going to pay a different level of tax than somebody else. And that speaks to a fairness issue that I think cuts across party lines. And I think more and more people are coming to the realization that our tax system is simply unfair.
Paul,
so I hope tonight what we see...
Yeah, let me just say that Rand Paul would like to eliminate the payroll and corporate tax, replace it by a value-added sort of a tax consumption tax, which I look at that and I say, okay, maybe that works. It's something that some people attack and say it's what Europe does, but wouldn't there be sticker shock for the consumer? Now they buy things and they say, oh my goodness, it's so much more expensive, even though psychologically they may be slightly incorrect on that.
Right, and one of the things that Senator Paul's been very straightforward about is telling people, look, my program is not going to raise enough money to run the big government that we have right now. He's not going to raise taxes. I think the debate he's trying to drive with that tax program is, are you willing to pay for the amount of government that you have? And we think that most people will not. They're given a choice between shrinking the size of government so that it spends less, or increasing what the government takes out of their payrolls every single week, that people will choose a smaller government. So it's designed to focus that exact type of debate.
Congressman Boyle, the leader on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton, wants to raise the rates for the higher earners. Donald Trump has a progressive tax where the bigger earners, the more wealthy people would be paying a bit more, certainly. But at some point, don't you have to look at the spending issue as well?
I think where there can be common ground, and what we really should push toward, is an agreement similar to what you saw in 1986 when Bill Bradley was a senator and Ronald Reagan was president, where we had a tax reform that did make things more fair and simplify the tax code. It brought down the rates by broadening the base. any sort of realistic attempt to do tax reform is going to have to follow that model. Where I think Republicans, where I hope Republicans and Democrats could come together and agree is on that, and specifically on the fairness issue. I can't find any person in my district who thinks it's fair that a teacher or a police officer in my district in Northeast Philadelphia pays a higher tax rate than someone who makes $10 or $20 million a year. That's even something that Rand Paul and Donald Trump have talked about. So trying to reform our tax code so that we don't have all of these differences for so-called earned income versus passive income, that's one thing. That Mick just addressed the fact that you can hire a lobbyist and look for loopholes in order to hide your money and push off paying taxes. Those are things that need to be addressed, and I feel like we could put together a real consensus in both parties to address.
Mick Mulvaney, Brendan Boyle, thank you both very much.